And yeah, I think we should be good to start off. So, really great to see all of our hackers back for another workshop series. We're really glad that you could join us today for our 3 workshops. And I'm delighted to say that for our first workshop, we actually have 2 speakers. So, I'd love to welcome Russell Dempsey and Ryan Baumann to the stage. And yeah, I'd love to hand straight over to you both to kick the session off.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Ryan, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to say, but yeah, I can kind of just hop into Helia, or if you want to chime in with anything.
No, I'm just here to support you and watch your presentation.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, cool. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Yeah, like we kind of just discussed, but or if you're just joining, I didn't prepare any slides. I did kind of want to use the resources that we've already got built on GitHub and various other places. So I've got a few different links that I plan on sharing, and I've got 2 browser windows here. So let me just make sure I get all my tabs going. So I've got the examples. I've got this migration guide, Helia playground that I've been playing with, and a project that we presented at IPFS camp a while back. It's a little bit older in the dependencies, but it really shows something we can get into here in a little bit. But yeah, if you're coming from JS IPFS, that's the library's been deprecated now. Then this guide right here, and I can share in the chat, right? Yeah, so this is that link. So yeah, if you're coming from JS IPFS, we have this migration guide. It's on the wiki of our Helia repo that will kind of talk you through, like if you're doing stuff with BitSwap, like how do you do that with Helia? Okay, well, it's blockstore.get input instead of .block get input, right? And then your various other API methods there. If something's missing from that when you're getting started, feel free to reach out to myself or Ryan, and we'll make sure that we get that updated. We did the HackFS hackathon and made a ton of improvements from that from hackers just like yourselves. So yeah, if you guys have anything, run into any trouble, please let us know. And we're constantly improving, and we need your feedback to improve. So yeah, this migration guide is going to be vital if you're familiar with JS IPFS. If you're not familiar with JS IPFS, then you may want to start over here at our IPFS examples / Helia examples, which has, I'll post that link, which has a ton of different examples. The way that this, can everybody see my screen fine? Is that sharing fine? Yeah. Okay, let me see if I can, yeah, just make sure it's good size. But yeah, so we, all the examples are in the examples folder. This is like a not really a mono repo, but it's, a single repo that includes just a bunch of isolated repos. And then these here, these examples, this list of examples are actually in their own repo. So you can kind of just cut that out, and then that's its own repo. But like if you need to modify the example, if like you want to contribute or something, then yeah, it's just all in this core repo. That's where the source is, and we just copy it over to these. That's not really helpful for hacking right now, but yeah, for hacking. So if you want to get started, if you're not familiar with Helia at all, you haven't used anything, you might want to start with this Helia 101 example, which kind of goes over the basics of Helia, like what does it do? How do I use it? Basic things like that. Like, hey, I want to get a CID. Like, what do I do? How do I get the CID? So we have Helia / Unix FS, and then we have other modules. And typically the pattern that we've been following with Helia is that like you would just pass the Helia instance that you have to these other modules, and you get the instance for whatever module that you would execute methods on. So we have like Helia / DAGFS, Helia / DAG JSON and other things like that. Let me see, npmjs.com/package, and then let's do that. And that's, yeah, here we go. So yeah, Helia strings, if you're doing just string stuff, JSON stuff. This is a new library. I just pushed 2 recent fixes to this. The remote pinning, if you're using like web3.storage or nft.storage. But yeah, there's packages under this Helia namespace. So those will follow sort of this similar pattern here for a lot of those. Yeah, the Helia 101 is great if you're really just getting started with Helia. If you're a fan of a particular tool, like we have examples of like starter code base basically for each of these. I tend to use Vite myself, or Vite. I don't know how to pronounce it. But yeah, I tend to use this. It works the best if you're dealing with any ESM CJS craziness. So it's just that the build is crazy fast. It works really good. So like a lot of the other examples that you'll see me as the author on are just based off of this like original example. If you've got a Webpack project or something that you want to add Helia into, we've got an example where we're doing it with Helia. If you're using CJS, we do have, Helia common JS examples. So like most of our packages now are ESM. So if you're used to CJS or common JS, your build tools, if you're not familiar with the configuring of your build tools to, consume ESM dependencies, you might run into some issues. And like the quickest fix might just be looking at some of the configuration here in this one. Otherwise, if you're using ESM, like following the latest instructions for your framework should just work. But let us know if that's not the case. And then there's other links like IPFS primer. If you're not familiar with IPFS in general, I guess I'm kind of presenting like most people are familiar with IPFS, and that may not be the case. So yeah, the IPFS primer would be really good to check out if you're not familiar with IPFS. But yeah, like if you're
Sorry, Russell. Somebody in the chat has asked if you could zoom in ever so slightly just to make it a bit larger on screen.
Yeah, totally. Oh, we'll go with 133%. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Cheers.
I do see a question in the chat, and I'll try and answer like this. I don't have plans. It's a workshop, usually in workshops at a hackathon, we'd be face to face and be really personal. So that's just how I'm trying to keep it here. But Matthias looks like he asked a question. Any context on why we needed to deprecate JS IPFS and jump to Helia? There's a big backstory on that. State of IPFS in JS. So there's a blog post that kind of talks about it. I don't know, Discordian, did you answer that? Yeah. Discordian's answer is great. JS IPFS was more or less one big node. JS IPFS also, Kubo used to be called Go IPFS, and they were the reference implementation. Like people confused Go IPFS with IPFS, but that's not the case. Like there's multiple different implementations, and we're trying to communicate that a little more now. And so JS IPFS tried to do a lot of things the exact same way that Go IPFS, the old Kubo or Kubo, did them, and it just got the code to an unmanageable state. Also, JS IPFS kind of cheated a little bit with like how it did the P2P thing. You will notice that Helia does have some connectivity issues right now. So I want to be upfront about that. I was planning on talking about that a little bit later, but yeah, right now it's great. So there is a tracking issue, and there's a Chromium bug with web transport. Let's see, what are we doing? We are doing golden path. Yeah, so this one kind of documents some of the issues, like with browser authored content and being able to like have other peers actually pull the content that you've created via Helia. We are pushing very hard for this. We're trying to unlock P2P with Helia in a way where we're not cheating like JS IPFS was. We're really passionate about peer-to-peer networking and pushing on browser platforms and doing a lot of work with IETF and W3C to try and get these things passed. And we've got a few known issues with Helia as far as like content being retrievable from browser authored content from a node in the browser, Helia node, that like where you create content, you upload a file from your machine or something, create a CID, and then you like try to fetch it from like a Kubo node or IRO node or some other IPFS implementation. Like there's some issues with that right now. So unfortunately, like the best way to use Helia right now for networking stuff, because we're not cheating, is to use delegated, just to give you guys this. Let's see. This guy right here, delegated content routing and the delegated peer routing. So you can just, check that guy out. So those two right there. And there's an example here that shows you how to use it. But basically, like you would have a Kubo node running behind the scenes and run it. Now, with that said, Helia will connect to other nodes throughout the network, but there is just a little side drill here. There's a current Chromium bug right now with their web transport implementation, which, Chromium is most greenfield browsers now, but I don't think all of them have web transport enabled, or no, only Safari doesn't have web transport right now. So like, yeah, you'll want to use like Chrome. Firefox does, there is a bug in Firefox right now. I think, I forget exactly what it was, but like Chrome, Brave, I think some other Chromium based browsers. But yeah, there's an issue here. So like, if you're big into the Chromium scene, like, or really passionate about doing peer-to-peer the right way, like actual peer-to-peer, go star this issue, please. They've been pretty responsive on this, so that's great, but yeah, this is currently kind of causing some issues. So what you'll see is you'll start connecting to some nodes, and then as soon as you get up to 64 connections, you'll see like some issue where Chrome or Brave will say, hey, like there's too many pending web transport sessions. Well, they're not actually closing them fully. So there's some issues with that. You might need to like refresh the page or do something like that. But if you use the delegated content and delegated peer routing, that will allow you to use Helia and do the things that you're expecting to be able to do. And then when we unblock some of these other issues, you just remove that delegated content routing and everything's just working. So that's the plan. Yeah, that was a big side chat there. Aside, sorry. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, brief breakdown. Does it make sense to use so different languages? Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, Discord, looks like you've got the chat. Thanks so much.
Russell, I wonder if there are some key points which you would like to cover via the chat as well, just so that people viewing back the recording. So if you do see any answered questions which you think might be important to cover, then feel free just to repeat those if you could.
That's a great call out. Thanks for that. I think we covered the one. yeah, people are just chatting about like browser browser functionality and divergence and like browser support of different things. So is Helia considered stable, alpha, beta? That's a great question. Yeah, so Helia, the API is fairly stable. And the one thing that's different, like the main thing that's different that I ran into the biggest trouble with when I was using Helia instead of JS IPFS was that it leans heavily into libp2p. So if you're not familiar with JS libp2p, that might be where you struggle the most. So like another really good link, libp2p configuration. So this guy, oh man, I hate when I press Shift Enter. But yeah, this guy right here is really good. Can I shrink this over here? There we go. So this guide, I think the libp2p team is still like updating this a little bit, and we fix things as we see them. But like this guide kind of talks about all the different pieces, all the different libp2p properties, when you instantiate the libp2p object. And so with Helia originally, so the original question was, is Helia stable, alpha, beta, etc. So it's pretty stable. I mean, it's released as 1, and I think we just released version 2. Not a huge change, but I think there were some libp2p changes behind the scenes that basically caused the major version bump. So it is stable, and we're going to continue building it with like the API that Helia has now, which is pretty stable. And like Helia, the core, that it's so small that it doesn't need to change much. What's awesome is that you can like the Helia Unix FS library is the pattern that we want to move forward with. So people will just, there's no example right here. It was on the migration guide, but yeah, so I think it's in the source code. Yeah. So yeah, like you create Helia and do what you normally do. And then like ideally you just create, you have a factory function, or, however you want to do it. You pass the Helia instance, and then the API for this object is like separate from the Helia core, which talks to libp2p and deals with the block store and like the lower level IPFS stuff. And so the application layer and the core layer are separate, which I think it's a huge improvement for maintainers, for contributors in the open source community. So yeah, it's very stable. And like I just pushed out the Helia remote pinning library, and like it just follows that same pattern. Like it exports this function here. And so like this library can like Helia can change or do whatever in this remote pinner. Excuse me 1 second. And this remote pinner library is just gonna like adapt to if Helia changes. So like it's all very modular. And it's the Helia API itself, I don't think will need to change very much at all. With that said, libp2p has been seeing some changes in the configuration as we've been pulling people from the old school JS IPFS to Helia and JS libp2p. So, there's been some improvements there, but I think it's like JS libp2p is still version 0.46.8. So technically it's not like solidified API, and it might still be changing, but it's like most of the configuration options for libp2p will remain the same. Like you're going to need to specify your transports. You're going to need to specify your stream muxers. I think peer discovery, let me see, services. Yeah, so this was a new field that was added just recently. Is like these used to be passed differently. I think DHT used to be like on the root configuration object, but now it's like inside of this services object. But like this, I think, is where most things will be going forward, and then we won't have to like maintain this surface API, config here. Yeah, long-winded answer to a fairly easy question. Sorry about that. But I wanted to give context. So does this mean you can have a user on your DApp become a transitive pin of whatever they're consuming? Moment. So yeah, it looks like Ryan answered. Yeah. So eventually, yes, the goal of Helia, and I want to make sure we're giving hackers the information they want to like succeed in this open data hack. But I do want to speak to that just really quickly. Yes, like the future goal is like every user using opening your application in their browser would then be a node who is helping propagate the data for that. And like with JS IPFS, it kind of worked like that, but it was all based on some behind the scenes Kubo nodes that we were running for you that like just couldn't actually do that. It wasn't actually distributed peer-to-peer network. It wasn't actually optimized for your subgraph of users, right? And so, yeah, with Helia, like when web transport's unblocked, when more of the network updates to the latest Kubo that supports web transport, and other IPFS implementations support web transport, like it's gonna be so good. I'm ecstatic. I'm so pumped. But we're not quite there. We're so close, but yeah, so for right now, delegated peer routing, delegated content routing is probably the best path. And then using like if you have a pinning storage provider or pinning service, using those pinning services, using those pinning services for storing your content from like your users in the browser. Like if you have them uploading a file or something, you want to use a pinning service or like some hosted node of your own, some Kubo node, to get that content. But yeah, this is part of the talking about like using libp2p more directly with JS IPFS. Like people didn't even see libp2p, I don't think, if I remember correctly. So, but now like there's some of this peer discovery and your bootstrap list and connection encryption and stream muxers and different things that you can pass to Helia. Some of these are set by default though. If you want to see the default, that would actually be a good thing to go over. Oh yeah, there's also Helia Pregon. Let me just send these because we're running out of time. And I'll share these in the IPFS Helia discussion and resources folder chat, or I don't know. I'm so new to that like Discord.
Yeah, I've shared a link to the zone in the chat as well, and obviously all of these resources will be included in the recording description if that's okay as well, Russell. So
totally,
yeah, all of that will be accessible after this workshop for everybody to get stuck into. So
awesome. Okay, and so I do want to, and then I'll give Ryan a chance to like speak to anything I most definitely missed that is important to discuss. But yeah, so I want to go here to the source and look at, we're going to utils, libp2p defaults browser. So this one, I look at this one again every day because like I'm not on the libp2p team. There's, some folks on the libp2p team, they're making changes that I can't always keep up with. This file is great for looking at like what is, like if I just call create Helia and get a node back, what is the libp2p config for that? And this is what that is for the browser, right? And so the like non-browser one is here, where like we can actually listen on using TCP, like regular networking stuff that is great, that we're not, prevented from in the browser. So yeah, and once Kubo has WebRTC, like Helia nodes are going to be so much better once the network updates to supporting WebRTC. We've also got some stuff coming to gateways that, you know, check out for the Kubo release notes, but stuff coming to gateways that'll really help a ton with like delegation of responsibilities of the peer and content routing. And Ryan, anything you want to chime in with?
No, this is great. I've had a blast answering questions and chatting with people. Yeah, nothing to add from me other than great work. Happy to be here, and it was great seeing everybody here today.
Yeah. Any other questions we missed, or anything you have for us, Rory?
No, I mean, as you say, it's really great to see your workshop discussing all of this, kind of more partial to an in-person event, which has been really great, and great to see the chat as well asking questions. So I don't know if there are any final ones coming through. One from Mateus, which asks about some ideas that you'd like to see coming out of the hackathon. So any more general information you could give would be great.
Yeah. So I've got a ton of stuff I want to do myself that I would, you know, I don't have time to do, but some things I would love to see is just helping us unblock the real P2P things. And like, obviously, like if you work at Google, or, you know, with W3C or IETF or something, and you want to help push some of those standards along, that's great. But for this hackathon, I would really love to see like some cool tooling that helps developers work, you know, with Helia better, and some applications exposing that functionality. Like it's in the prize description, but, and I think I got my manager wasn't a big fan of the way that I phrase Ryan and I phrase some of those things, but like honestly, like we need community support. We want people to get involved. We want you guys to give us feedback. And so libraries that can unblock other developers or improvements. I mean, that's not really for this hackathon, but outside of this hackathon, like having contributors back to Helia would be great. Like a Helia fetch library, there is a JS IPFS fetch. Is it? I think it's by Mauve. Yeah, Ranger Mauve. So this one is super cool, and I did like the Helia Service Worker Gateway. If you look at that, has the code for this like inside of it, kind of, but the Helia version of Helia fetch. So it's basically a fetch function, but what it does is it fetches from IPFS using delegated content routing, Kubo, and also the routing v1 content routing from the IPFS.io gateway and CID contact and things like that, and from the peer-to-peer network. So like having that like consolidated as a library, like that would be huge. And like if you don't have a popular npm package, like that would probably be very popular and be super cool. So I'm not super familiar with hackathons myself. Like Ryan's the expert here on hackathons, but like I'm looking for things that if you've heard of the flywheel analogy, things that increase the flywheel speed. Honestly, like help us all make peer-to-peer and Web3 explode, you know, in a good way. The good explosions of like confetti.
Yeah, even some games or something would be great. Like make like anything peer-to-peer, local first. Pretty much everything would be exciting in those spaces, I think.
Yeah, and if you,
Amazing.
yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you both so much. A really great session. I think just from looking at the chat itself, you can see how engaged everybody was. So yeah, and also with the insights at the end in terms of the hackathon, I'm sure everybody will be leaving the workshop feeling super inspired to build something relevant for their project. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you both again for, yeah, a really great session. So cheers.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.